This is a censer made from terracotta clay. It has been used in my family for as long as I can remember, and many more years before that. No one knows when it was made or who it was made by, but they know it comes from a city called Famagusta in northern Cyprus. Separated from the more prominent southern Greek side of Cyprus, the north is a de facto state of Turkey, and it is where half of my family originate. I am half English and half Turkish Cypriot. This censer marks the beginning of my exploration into the realm of superstition as a means to construct a more considered worldview, based on sensitivity and connectivity between nature and culture. In Cyprus, there is a wide belief in a supernatural force known as the evil eye, and this clay censer is rooted in a superstitious ritual performed to drive away its negative effects. Inside the censer, dried leaves from an olive tree are set alight and left to burn. Once the flames subside and the embers begin to smoke, the censer is passed around the family members gathered in the back garden. Each person takes a turn wafting the smoke around their head before passing it to the next. The olive tree is regarded as a sacred plant, and consequently the smoke from its leaves is thought to have protective qualities. This ritual has always been an experience of contemplation and connection for me. I feel connected to my environment through the texture of the dried olive leaves, through the heat of the fire and the sun, and through the smoke rising into the clear sky. Throughout history, superstition has been an essential way for humans to make sense of their environment, allowing them to deduce some form of cause and effect from the unknowable events of the natural world. In a lunar eclipse, the moon turned to red because the jaguar spirits of the deceased rose up, attacked it, and made it bleed. This was a deeply threatening yet emotional explanation for the indigenous Tabo people of South America. And as Campbell said in the British Journal of Sociology in 1996, it was an event which would have threatened their very existence, therefore requiring a passionate reaction. This is very different to how we view the lunar eclipse now, with the underpinnings of science deeply ingrained in daily life. A blood moon is definitely still a spectacle, but because we understand it empirically as a result of light and shadow, we observe it from a distance, from the position of disconnection, and then go about our days. I think this represents our current relationship with the earth. As Philippe Descola wrote, it is based on a separation of nature and culture. The merciless modernisation and industrialisation of the 19th century drove a division between humans and the environment by regarding the latter as something to be controlled, artificially preserved and exploited. Bruno Latour emphasised how nature became simply a resource or a backdrop. It was no longer a part of us, just as we were no longer a part of it. Judging by the current environmental issues facing our world, this attitude is unsustainable. Latour realised this as well. He said rather than continuing to modernise, we must instead ecologise, describing human development as a process of becoming ever more attached to nature, rather than a liberation from it. By separating superstition from its more trivial manifestations in modern life, it can be used as a way of explaining things that happen through a lens of fictive narratives rather than through scientific fact. Timothy Morton believed that ecological awareness was a case of thinking and feeling at multiple scales, disorienting normative concepts like human, nature, thing, and life. Fiction is a vehicle to think and feel at a different scale. Marr and Oatley described fiction as a useful simulative tool to examine the way we think about the world and experiment with alternatives. Rather than a dismissible set of irrational beliefs like stepping on cracks or broken mirrors, I see the concept of superstition more as a positive form of fiction or speculation, which leads to more considered emotional responses to our environment, much like that of historic and indigenous cultures. It is the colour of the evil eye amulets known as nazars in Cyprus, another form of superstitious protection against the evil eye. It is the colour of good fortune and protection. It is also the colour of the sea and the sky, a colour of nature. At the same time, it is unnatural, artificial. It is the colour of cobalt used in battery manufacture, cobalt blue, electric blue. It is the colour of the internet. It is a colour of culture, a colour of nature, and a colour of superstition. In a book called Contested Natures, McNaughton and Urry said that nature seems turned into a mere artifact of consumer choice, as a result of the dominance of Western consumerism. I combine the sensor with McDonald's material identity as a symbol of our detachment from the natural environment. I burnt some olive leaves inside the boxes made for fries and Big Macs, as if they were sensors. I made olive leaves out of the McDonald's brown bag and burned those. And I did the same with the entire packaging. While representing the larger issues of consumerism, these pictures also made me think of more ground-level environmental issues like waste disposal and recycling. I made a sensor coated in the McDonald's branding as if it had been made by them for some weird occult Happy Meal toy. I paired it with another symbol of consumerism, the Shell oil logo. These sensors holding a burning substance is provocative because of the connections to environmental misconduct. Shell with oil spills in the ocean and the burning of fossil fuels, and fast food restaurants with the vast deforestation to make space for cattle farming. The 19th century's Industrial Revolution was a time of rapid modernization and technological advancement. There were so many mechanical inventions that fundamentally changed our relationship with the world. For example, the steam engine and the internal combustion engine, the telephone and the light bulb. Industrial Britain being veiled in a thick blanket of smoke expelled from tall chimneys is still an image that embodies our relationship with the environment, even today. Slip casting is a technique employed in industrial ceramics making to mass produce objects with little or no trace of human involvement, a practice born out of consumerism and industrialization. I used a sledge to make 4 long lengths of plaster, which could later be cut to form 8 out of the 10 parts for the outer mould. I made the tools to do this from scratch, laser cutting acrylic, filing it down and reinforcing it to make the sledge, and CNC cutting the wooden components to piece together a long rig to run the sledge down. I designed a single sculptural sensor inspired by the shape of a metal gear, a sprocket, a mechanical component, as a symbol of industrialization. But it is used as a tool for superstition, and thus for a connection to an alternate way to relate to the rest of the natural world. Finished with a matte blue underglaze, the sensor plays with notions of nature and artificiality. It softens the rigid ontology perpetuated by continuous scientific and industrial growth, by opening it up to stories, oral histories, fictions, speculations, and irrational emotions. And at the same time, it shifts the concept of superstition to something more tangible today, relating it to the modern world and modern issues. The sensor facilitates a time and a place for anyone to contemplate the possible relationships between nature, culture, and the supernatural, itself posing questions with its shape, stature, and colour. It is the main focus of a wider collection of ceramic sensors that I made throughout the project, including a smaller version made from the plaster mould offcuts, and a couple in the shape of industrial stack chimneys which I threw on the wheel. I designed them to be used as tools for the performance of superstitious ritual, and specifically to be used by my family, to start conversations and a new framework for a modern, environmentally concerned, superstitious practice. This is the next step for my exploration, taking it out of isolation and placing the sensor in the intimate setting of a family gathering, documenting how it is perceived and used, to see what conversations it brings up with the older and younger members of the family, and how it fits into or sticks out from the surrounding environment. I'd like to use it as a place to discuss our personal relationships with nature, to hear other people's opinions on superstition and their symbols of connection and industrialization. The bright evil eye blue shifts the form of these things into something less familiar and more sculptural, forcing a new perspective on the issues explored in the project. The objects create an uncanny suspense of knowing and unknowing, invoking visceral reactions first to the sensor's aesthetics and then to their contexts.